What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. We're starting off with our World Cup predictions. We're going to go group by group, and this is the very first video of this series. Obviously, we are starting with Group A, and in this group, we have Mexico, South Africa, South Korea, and Czech Republic. This is the brand new expanded 48 team format, so the top two teams advance plus the best third place teams. I believe it's the top 8 out of the 12. So not every third place team is guaranteed, but there's a good chance that most likely if you're following in third, you're probably going to advance considering the odds. But we're going to start it off with team 1, and that is Mexico. I'll break it off first for you, Will, and give you my thoughts and everything. So this is Javier Aguirre's new team. He's taking over. Seems like everybody's bought in. There seems to be more of a focus on this discipline and in the defense and in the back, and kind of maintaining a strong composure, as well as utilizing the home field advantage that you have. Obviously, we have the altitude of Azteca. Look, playing in Mexico is tough. Obviously, we all know we follow CONCACAF pretty well and very thoroughly. Like, Mexico is a really, really hard place to play. And considering that the last 2 World Cups that were hosted in Mexico were both instances where Mexico made it the farthest. No other World Cup has Mexico made it as far as they did as in their home World Cups in 1986 as well as 1970. Obviously, that was a long time ago, but I think that's something to say in the likes of how tough it is to play there. Overall, I think the team is pretty balanced on all levels. I don't think there's one true weakness. I think as a whole, the team's just not good enough to maybe like be contenders, but I don't know if there's a glaring weakness in each level of the field. Obviously, your key players are going to be Raul Jimenez and Edson Alvarez, and depending on what you're going to get out of Santiago Jimenez, he can be a danger. But overall, I think the big narrative coming out of Mexico and what it is going into this tournament is, can they break that round of 13 curse on home soil? They made, like I said, made it to the quarters both times in their home World Cups. Will they make it further this time? I'm passing it over to you now, Will.
Yeah, it's an interesting World Cup for Mexico. Like you said, maybe less than a year ago, I would even say probably 6 months ago, Mexicans were, and normally the Mexican fan base are not the most optimistic fans you're going to find in the world, but these guys were beyond pessimistic. Everything looked doom and gloom. I think the majority of Mexican fans kind of felt like this was either going to be a rugged second place or you're just barely squeaking out with a third place. Now that we have an official group with Czech Republic in this, I think it's going to be a little bit different. I think Mexico's goal, if you ask the whole entirety of the fan base, I would pre-assume that it's going to be 7 points. I would think 6 points. Most Mexicans maybe disagree with me, but I think they would be happy with the 6 point tournament within this group stage. Like you said, it's going to be tough for all these teams to play there. Estadio Azteca, and we know they're going to also have a game at Estadio Corona against South Korea. This is a tough environment. You know, we've already seen in the Intercontinental that these fans are showing out, and this was for DR, Congo, and Iraq. You know, could you just imagine when Mexico hosts? So it's a different environment. It's going to be a different thing for all 3 of these teams: South Korea, Czech, and South Africa. But I think the Mexican team, like you said, with the Santi Jimenez, obviously not being in form within the past or two, and we know with the national team it's a lot harder. You have the likes of like an Hormiga Gonzalez who's rising through the ranks with Chivas. He's had a phenomenal year, 12 goals, I believe, already in the Clausura. So it's interesting. There's a lot of different young talent with him and Gilberto Mora, you know, and a Marcel Ruiz who looks like he might be coming back. So it's going to be different for Mexico, difficult. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that home field advantage could play a big role for them.
Yeah, well, let's hop over to South Korea, which some people have as also favorites to get out of this group. Pretty much their big identity for South Korea is that they're going to be a high pressing kind of a counter attacking based team. They're a pretty fast, very athletic team. This is most likely going to be Son Heung-min's final World Cup as he probably ages out of the team. He's 33 now. So this is going to be his last real chance to really kind of, make a statement on like Asian football, as well as just his legacy on the South Korea international stage. Also, another big person to think about is Kang-in Lee, obviously the creative midfielder for PSG. He's not a starter there, but gets regular minutes. He is kind of going to be the new heir to Son Heung-min, and for South Korea, going to be that new guy who kind of steps in and going to be that. Hopefully, you think he can kind of help push Korea into this new generation that necessarily Sun's generation wasn't able to do. So it's going to be kind of this interesting transition. You have two really good players right there. One of the big concerns I would say for South Korea is they have a lot of defensive struggles, and we saw that a lot in this March window. And I'm really curious to see how well they handle this Mexican pressure, because I think Mexico's going to see the blood in the water and go after it. They looked really bad against Ivory Coast. They performed a little bit better against an Austrian team this March window, but I think they should be good enough, because granted, like an Ivory Coast attack is a little bit scarier than maybe a Mexico or a Czechia. So I do think they'll be able to hold themselves a little better. But I do have a lot of stylistic concerns against that South Africa game, where South Korea could easily get caught on counters. It's just a matter of South Africa will capitalize or not, because that South African team kind of has a lot of the similar DNA that we see from Ivory Coast, except Ivory Coast is just at a higher level and can put those chances away. But yeah, what do you think of South Korea?
Yeah, I this is an interesting take because, like you said, dude, they are a counterattacking team. They're a team that that can cause problems within this group. I think on the day, and we're going to get to the other two teams in a second, but this is when you look at the wholeality of a group. I think this is genuinely one of the most balanced groups. It's right up
Oh
there
yeah.
with Group D in the United States. It's any team on the day could win. I look at this kind of like in an NBA series. All these games could all go to a 7-game series. It is genuinely that balanced. I think, obviously, like you said, Korea, when it looks at the talent gap, has a little bit more than you would look at some of the other teams potentially in the group. Obviously, like you said, Heung-min Sung being his last World Cup, Kim Min Jae in the back line, the PSG man in the midfield. So there is talent on this team. I will say my biggest worry for Korea is leaking goals.
Oh yeah.
This is a team when it comes to international football. We've seen in the AFC Cup, we've seen in previous World Cups, they leak goals, dude. They're not defensively the most sound. Kim Min Jae in that last World Cup, I believe he did play. He was a lot younger, but even still, then it's just this has always been a kind of difficulty for the Koreans going into these World Cups is they're going to leak goals. So I'm curious to see how they do. This is a group stage where they don't really have to face the likes of a Portugal or a Brazil or like a Belgium right away.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to be different. But yeah, I will say Korea does give me some worries. I would have them more of a favorite in the group, but there are some concerns with the team.
So the next team we're going to go to is Chechnya and Czech Republic. Obviously, this is a team who's a very physical team. They like to play a lot of the mid block. They got a big result against a Denmark team that honestly I thought Denmark was going to be the team that got out of the playoffs. But Denmark is also a team that's kind of continuing to fall in quality. They're not necessarily have met the heights that they did back in that 2020 Euros that we've seen. Obviously, I anticipate Czech Republic to kind of play a more defensive approach. I think they're going to want South Korea and a Mexico to kind of go after them, and maybe even a South Africa. I'm kind of curious to see how they play this game and how they kind of assess their opponents on this. It's going to be really interesting. But the biggest thing is that they have to keep a clean sheet, because Chechnya, I looked in their last previous games, they've barely kept a clean sheet. I think only like one over the past like 2 years, or two over the past 2 years, or something like that. They're very leaky in the back, and these are not against like the best of teams. And considering that South Korea and Mexico have pretty lethal attacks, Chechnya has to remain defensively solid if they want any chance to like compete. They have to perform like they did against Croatia in their second game in qualifying, which was probably their best result that we've seen from them in recent times, which was that 0-0 draw against Croatia. So if they can bring that level of quality to this group, it can make it super interesting, and we could see a lot of draws in this scenario.
Yeah. First and foremost, shout out Czech Republic. Shout out one of my best friends, Pavel. Love you, man. Happy for you. He was going crazy, saying a bunch of stuff that I don't even know in Czech, but he's excited for the boys in the tournament. But yeah, I agree, dude. Czech Republic reminds me kind of like an icy hot cold pack. One moment you putting that layer bad boy on your back, and I'm talking about you're feeling the burn, dude. Czech Republic was making Denmark sweat. They were coming back against Ireland. This is a team, like you said, they were on the ropes with Croatia, and they can compete well. And we've seen it in previous Euros and qualifiers and friendlies. But then this is a team that gets cold. They lost to the Faroe Islands in World Cup qualifiers.
Yeah.
They went down in that Ireland game in the first 20 minutes. within, I mean, defensively, they looked like
And
kids
they
out
got
there. It
blown
was
out
rough.
in the first Croatia game.
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, this defense, and you can kind of tell and see that a lot of times they haven't been tested, or they're just not an experienced back line. And there's a lot of problems with it overall for the Czech though in the World Cup. It is a little bit of a slight concern. I won't lie, the weather I think is going to have a little bit of a play on these
That's
guys.
true.
I think there's going to be a lot of different factors within it. I will say I think the Czechs are going to show up. I think they're going to show out. The team, Patrick Schick, obviously this is his first World Cup, probably going to be his last. They're going to show up. I don't have any disregard that the team's not going to play to their ability, but it's just going to be tough against obviously we already talked like of the likes of a Mexico at home. That's going to be something the Czechs haven't seen. If they struggle away at Faroe Islands, I mean, boy, oh boy, I wouldn't want to go to Azteca. That's just not something that's on the writing book. But yeah, I think overall, I think the Czechs can. This is a doable group. This isn't anything impossible for them. So it's going to be different. It's going to be difficult, but I could see them making it a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility they could draw 3 games. Like, I think that's not necessarily out of the question. It's
Yeah.
it's possible. I don't have them necessarily doing that. I think they're going to drop that Mexico game in particular, but yeah, man, we'll see. We'll move over to the final team, and that is South Africa hosting their, or not hosting, but this is their first World Cup since hosting in 2010. This is a team that we saw a lot of in the March window. Obviously, they had the matchup against Panama and back to back, and they're very like defensive, catch you on the counter, long ball, like use your speed type of team. They are pretty creative too in the midfield, honestly, from what I've seen from them recently. The biggest thing that with South Africa is I just can't trust them to put shots away. And the fact that like we look at their March window and they didn't put as many goals away compared to the chances that they created, I just have a lot of concerns that like if they can't do that against Panama, do I expect them to do that against a Croatia? I mean, a Czech Republic? Do I expect them to do that? They could probably do it against a South Korea. South Korea has been pretty leaky, but can they do that against a Mexico? No, Mexico is just not going to give you. These teams aren't going to give you as many chances. So somebody has to step up for South Africa and actually put those shots away. So because of that, I kind of have South Africa on the lower totem pole of this group because while I think they have the talent to get some victories and like get some results, they just haven't consistently like scored goals, which is the most important part. Especially if you want to get into the third place advancement group, you gotta have goal differential. So if you can't get goals, like I have a hard time picking South Africa to really do much. So, but I'm willing. I'm also not necessarily counting them out either. I do think they have the possibility to their games are going to be interesting. South Africa is not going to be a cakewalk. Not for Mexico, not for South Korea, not for Czech Republic. So this is going to be a competitive team. It's just a matter of how competitive are they going to be when it comes down to it.
Yeah. South Africa previous to AFCON, when they had qualified back in September, I believe, it was everybody's dark horse. It was the darling team. It was, I remember even when the World Cup draw came out, so many content creators, so many guys out there were talking about South Korea like they were Swiss cheese, dude. This was the greatest thing ever to exist, and like peanut butter just got invented. And I look at South Korea in the recent form, and Julian, dude, this is a team that they're coming into this World Cup pretty banged up. They're not coming in the hottest form, kind of like how they came off of that World Cup. They had an interesting AFCON. Obviously, that was a tough game against Egypt, but against Zimbabwe and Angola, they had to really fight for it. It wasn't convincing at all. They lost to a Cameroonian team who's not even going to this World Cup. It just looked kind of lackluster. Obviously, those friendlies. I mean, God, boy, oh boy. Sometimes when I look at South Africa, they remind me a lot of my national team. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of speed. There's a lot of physicality, but there's not a lot of goals. This isn't a team that knows how to put in the back of the net, and it's kind of like aggravating. Like a Mofokenga. I'm probably butchering the hell out of his name, but he's a big star talent on the team. Obviously, Lyle Foster's the number 9, but he just hasn't been enough. And there's a lot of other guys around the field. Shout out Ronan Williams. I think he's an absolute beast of a goalkeeper, also. But like you said, it just seems like South Africa they're at the wrong moment at the wrong time, kind of hitting that lower spectrum, of their gameplay. It felt like they hit that high back, last year in October and September after qualifying, and really just kind of been getting humbled a little bit, I would say. So it is going to be difficult. Obviously, spoiler alert, I think these guys are going to be last place when we get to our predictions, but I feel like South Africa are going to struggle, because these are teams that I personally see a Czech and a Korea kind of bunkering down against them. I could see them, especially the Koreans, knowing how defensively, their wounds can
Give them
be.
the ball and see
I
what they
could see
can
the
do.
Koreans, yeah, I could see them being a little bit more complacent with the draw, So it's going to be tough for South Africa. Like I said, this is a team that can cause damage, though. They can still win. You know what I mean? I don't want to take the ghost away of, Shabalala, what he did back in 2010 against Mexico. I mean, it could happen. It really could. There could be another guy doing that again in the Estadio Azteca. But like I said, it's going to be difficult for these guys. I think it's going to be tough. Hugo Bruce, he's also like a Thomas Christensen. I think he knows ball and he knows how to do it, but he sticks to his ways. He's very, very, this is how we're going to go and this is how we're going to roll, and he doesn't like to mix it up a lot. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, those are all four teams. I would say some key matchups to watch is the first one, Mexico versus South Africa, the Mexico opener. This is going to be immense pressure for Mexico. Mexico cannot drop points on this first game. To me, I think the pressure and everything that comes from if they drop points here is going to be astronomical. Mexico has to come up and make a result. South Africa, I think they could probably get away with it, but I think that opener is really interesting. And then I will say South Korea versus Chechnya. To me, this is like a pivotal game for second place because this is going to be like, what can South Korea, what can Czech Republic do? Because to go into my predictions, I have Mexico going first, I have South Korea going second, and I have Czech Republic going third, and South Africa as fourth. But that South Korea versus Czech Republic game is going to be very crucial to determine who gets into second or third. And my bold take here is that I think the third place team will not advance. I think there's not a lot of points to go around here. I think we're going to anticipate some draws, and whoever gets third here is not going to have the goal differential to get by.
I could see that. I could see that. So I wouldn't say a hot take. But that's a
It's a
solid
bold
take.
take.
It's a solid. Yeah, it's a good take. It's a good take. Yeah, for my predictions, man, as much as I don't like saying this, I'm not a meat writer of this team, but I could see Mexico getting first. I think the Czechs have enough to get second.
Okay.
I really do. I think they've got two draws in them and a win in this tournament. South Korea third, and then the Koreans, or excuse me, the South Africans fourth. It's going to be a tough World Cup for the Asian and African teams. I feel like in certain plays, in certain stadiums. But yeah, I really do think Czechia has enough. I don't really have a bold take, but I will one up what you said. I kind of like you said, I think it's going to be a race for that third place because South Africa, like you said, Julian, within those three teams, whichever one of them can pick off a win from each other or whoever can pick off points from Mexico, more than likely will either be second or third place. It really is going to come down to it. Maybe a bold take. I don't think anybody's going to follow on 0 points. I don't see South Africa getting
Yeah,
zero.
I
I don't
see
see
that.
South Korea getting zero. I genuinely see all these games being toss ups. They're going to be close games. I mean, dude, I'm going to keep it real. Mexico could get third with just how
Yeah,
close this group could
I
be.
don't think
It,
Mexico's
it could be all over
a
them.
lock for first. I just have
Yeah,
them first
no,
because that
definitely
home
not.
field I think is really big. But anyways, who do
Yeah.
you guys have getting out of the group? What is your standings for Group A? Does Mexico survive the pressure? Does South Africa shock everybody? Like, let us know in the comments down below. If you want to see more content just like this. And Group B, please be sure to click and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.